So we're here on the banks of the Ganges at Rishikesh, and I'm here with Shakti Anand, who we met at the Keshvananda Ashram in Haridwar. And I would just want to say it was a very auspicious meeting there. It was very auspicious to meet you there because you mentioned you had just come back from visiting Babaji's cave that morning. Is that right?
That's absolutely right. Yes, we were at Dwarkat and visited Babaji's cave there, and we just caught the train back to Haridwar and arrived at 4 a.m, so a bit blurry-eyed, but wonderful glow, which you probably picked up.
Yes, it was a wonderful glow.
And that vibration must have sent some signal to you, and that's why we're here.
Yes. Well, it certainly did. I mean, Lahiri Mahashai being awakened by Mahaavatar Babaji, and the ashes being there was very, very auspicious.
Yes, and then we came with that energy directly from Babaji's cave, where the whole palace was materialized, and by the dhuni, the fire. It was very special.
Yeah, and tell us a little bit more about Mahaavatar Babaji. You know, you were just mentioning to me how these masters are very alive, even though Lahiri Mahashai is ascended, Mahaavatar Babaji, you know. Tell us a little bit more what Mahaavatar Babaji and these masters mean to you.
To me personally, being a Kriya Yogi, they're within me. I mean, they're my guides, more than my guides, they're my breath, as that's the teaching of Kriya, which is life itself. And that inner guidance is really how I live. It's a way of being awakened and yet functional in a world that is living from the level of the lower chakras. I don't like to use lower and higher, but that's how it is. Living in the level of the Shakti and then creating the Shiva stillness from the Babaji and the Hedimasi, from the lineage, from the masters, having that access point. Because Babaji was the avatar of Shiva incarnated and still is alive.
Wait, please. So Babaji is the incarnation of Shiva?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
Yes, and is alive. You know, he's in his physical body here on this earth and will remain with us until the end of time, until the end of Kal.
Now that is, I remember reading that in the Autobiography of Yogi and just being overwhelmed with such a deep sense of love.
Yes.
I mean, here's Mahaavatar Babaji who's going to stay incarnated until humanity evolves.
Yes, isn't that beautiful?
Yes, and it's profoundly beautiful.
Yeah.
And he's accessible. Tell us about this, how he's accessible in your experience. I mean, if you like.
You don't ask very easy questions, my friend. His accessibility is he's as much as accessible to you as he is to me. It's not a question of belief. It's a question of surrender and trust and letting go of one's identity, the physical identity, the personality, the ego, whatever words you want to put on that. So it's that, really. It's I am that. That's Babaji. Mm-hmm. That very aham brahmasmi is Babaji. When we let go of our own way of attachments and identity and beingness, I'm this, I'm that, that whole noise, you know, the labels, the boxes, and surrender.
Yeah. Okay, now this is where, you know, you were talking about you're teaching Kriya Yoga.
Yes.
You're one of the few people that teaches it at Keshvananda's ashram.
Yes.
You also teach it in Spain.
Yes, in Ibiza.
Ibiza.
Beautiful island.
A beautiful island. Yeah. And tell us a little bit more about, you were saying this is for people who really want to live consciously. What does that mean?
Well, we're creating a Kriya's Conscious Living in Ibiza itself, which is a small gathering, an intimate gathering for those that are willing to step into the next level of their consciousness, of coming from a place of integrity, of wholeness and aliveness. And it's that aliveness factor which is the living part of consciousness. I think most people associate, yoga as being on the mat, the asanas, the kundalini. It's like the next high now. You know, it's replaced alcohol. We go to yoga to get a high, but we don't have to necessarily go to yoga to get a high. We can get a high from life itself if we're living in an awakened state. So it's that process of how do we create that in life itself with our relationships, everyday encounters, you know, with our sense of giving, with our sense of acceptance, with our sense of tolerance, which is so needed in this world. And our unifying way of being with one another, recognizing myself in the other, which is ultimately what it's all about, yoga. That is yoga. And so it's taking yoga to the next level.
Yeah.
So living consciously.
Living consciously and doing the practices of Kriya.
Yes.
And you were saying that when people are ready for Kriya, because you said it will cut away the ego, which my experience is that that can
and
be
that's
challenging.
and that's not an easy thing. Yeah, it's not like slicing a cake.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell
And you'll be down on your knees and crying and resisting.
And yet the Kriya is doing this work.
And yet the Kriya is doing it.
Tell us about that.
But be a bit more specific. What would you like me to say?
Well, there's the technique, which is having an effect
Yes.
in the spine. It's like an effect with.
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to divulge the sadhana practice itself. That requires the meditation initiation of Kriya Yoga. That is a sacred science involved in that. We certainly can't sort of relay that in the course of this interview. But enough be said that it is at a cellular level. The change is happening at a cellular level using the breath, using the technique of breath and the prana, because prana is a life force which is more than breath. And then recognizing the influence of the mind with the breath. But also, I think the fundamental aspect of it is the energy body, which is the chakras, and recognizing that our samskaras and our vasanas, which is our desires and attractions and addictions, reside there. So by Kriya process or Kriya sadhana, we are enabling ourselves to wipe away and rub those vasanas, and that's how it works. So that then you become available to the Kriya process of consciousness shining through you.
Okay.
Yeah, so the veil is now being lifted.
And that essence exists already inside of us.
Of course, yes, everybody has, even the dogs.
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
God, everybody, everything.
And the Kriya, then this is where Mahaavatar Babaji, the masters, are there to assist.
Yes, for those that are ready for the core. Yes, not for everybody. Only for those that are ready and willing. Yeah? There are many people who might want it for ulterior motives, and they are not. They don't go to those people. They're not stupid. Especially, I think nowadays we have to be very careful. Yoga has become a commercial commodity, and so it's being used to influence one's Maya desires and vasanas also.
Right.
So it will not go there.
Yeah,
It has that discrimination of wisdom.
Yeah, one of our colleagues in Amiroja was talking about the dangers of spiritual ego.
Yes, totally.
Yeah.
Especially now, especially now because we don't have the structure. We don't have the old school Gurukula system. The guides are not there directly in front of us, and we have to go within, which is where the Babaji and the Lahiri Masyas and the Swami Keshavanandas and the Yoganandas, they are inside us, and we have to go inside.
Yeah, and their living presence.
And their living presence, totally.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And in each other's engagements as Kriya Bans as well, we recognize that. It's all about the frequency and the vibration, ultimately, because that's all we are. And so when we are in tune and in harmony with our own self, because that's all we are vibrating at that level of reflection in life, then we will draw in Babaji's energy also inside us.
Yeah. And so if a person's really ready to do the work,
Yes.
and you mentioned surrender,
Yes.
so there's discipline, sadhana,
Yes. And let's not forget Anand.
and Anand. Please say more.
Anand is the bliss factor. It's that contentment. It's that recognition of santosh, which is peace and joy, and just that smile, that Madonna smile. It's that, and that does surface in spite of your circumstances, and it does allow you to be detached from the circumstances that might look and appear like they're very hard and challenging in your life.
Yeah, we've got some friends here visiting us. Oh, hey there. They're drawn to the bliss. We've got 4 little doggies here with us. Anand, I would really appreciate to explore this a little bit more. You talk about that bliss that naturally comes. Lahiri Mahashaya was known as an incarnation of bliss. And so this bliss that comes up within, and yet at the same time the world can be challenging. In my own experience, I've traveled to places that have been, suffered poverty and war and destruction, and yet while practicing Kriya there can be this bliss. So talk a little bit about this conscious living in a world where there can be apparently, many challenges and suffering.
Well, I mean, Lahiri Masaya wasn't always in the light. You have to remember that. You know, before he went to Ranikhet and before he was ordered by Babaji himself, you know, he was an accountant, functioning in the world just like everybody else with their challenges. And at one point, I remember a story where his wife was so angry with him because he just didn't have enough money, and so he had his challenges. And then he basically, you know, he produced all this wealth in front of her and then made it disappear. He said, "Is that what you want?" and shouted at her because he saw through the illusion of Maya. And so there's a story and there's a revelation there. You know, it's the story. It's the stories we tell ourselves. So you can either believe the fiction or you can believe you're the storyteller. What would you rather do? You're the storyteller, not the story.
Yeah, and what I think is beautiful about Lahiri Mahashaya and this whole lineage is it's a science. So
yes, it is a science.
Try it for yourself.
Yes, yeah.
You can listen to me, but you don't have to believe everything. Look to your own experience.
Absolutely, and it is definite self-realization. Is you are working in your own inner engineering and rewiring your body at a cellular level. It's chemistry, and you have to work in your body. Your body is the machine. Your body is where it's happening, and that will guide you itself, which is why going inside is paramount and necessary. But in order to get to that level as well, because that isn't such an easy thing, you know, it's easy to talk about it right here in Ganga, you know, in front of the river, but as soon as you leave there, and you're faced with your debts or your relationships going sour, and the last thing on your mind is sitting there and going within. You know, you want to be out there in the world, and that's what we're talking about at that level. That's conscious living. And how do you arrive at that level? Because you work at the cellular level and you recognize who you are. Like, who am I? That eternal question, who am I? And that source of that who am I will formulate at a cellular level, at an energetic level, and this is Kriya. And so it's the two together, and it's Ishvara Pranidhan, which means living in Brahman. I am Ishvara. It's the state of Ishvara. It's the state of godliness. Not because of ego, not because, but because you are that. Because you recognize it, you feel it. You know, all your senses are alive to that. You know, it's like being in love, but there is the love is inside, so it resonates at that frequency because you recognize yourself as that. You're the storyteller, not the story. Not from words, not from your mind, not from your beliefs. Not forcing it, not with power, but because it is that.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And I think it's quite beautiful that you're offering opportunities with you and others into Kriya, and then this tradition is available. You mentioned that the autobiography was
Yes, it was my 20 years ago calling, which I put down, by the way. And then I picked it up when my circumstances were. And that's the other thing with this guidance that you get. It will not take you away from your life. It's not about shunning responsibility. This is the other aspect, which is terribly important to remember, that it's not, being on the journey of consciousness is not about shunning responsibility. In fact, it makes you more responsible. And that's really important to get that message, I think, across to people, because people think you sit there and you just meditate all day long and you forget about work, you forget about people, but it's not. You live from a much more wholesome place and you're able to offer much more.
And you were saying Kriya is action.
Yeah, Kriya is to act. It's to act. That is karma. It's karmic existence, actually. That's what the word Kriya means, to live from that place. So Kriya is to act, karma yoga.
And it's an ancient science.
It's an ancient Vedic science, that's true. And Babaji and Lahiri Masaya and Yogananda and Swami Keshwananda, the evidence is out there. And now it's just up to you.
It's just up to you. All right. So everyone, it's up to you.
If you want it. It's another state of bliss.
And if that's a person's path, it may be a different path. But
and if it's not that one, then it's another one. But ultimately, all roads lead to Rome.
Wonderful.